Hey guys, it's Randy with Lowbuck LS here again, and in this episode we're going to attempt to install this, which is a factory narrowband NTK oxygen sensor, O2 sensor, and we're going to install it in the downpipe downstream of the turbo and attempt to get the factory ECM running in closed loop mode with one O2 sensor downstream of the turbo. So if you guys watched a couple episodes ago where I did the episode comparing turbos and superchargers and nitrous, that was the one complaint I had about this turbo truck, is it basically there's no spot for the factory narrowband O2 sensors, so I wasn't able to run it in closed loop. And in the comments of that video, a viewer named Michael Clore, he suggested a method where you can basically wire the output of one O2 sensor to both channels on the ECM, and you got to do a few changes in HP tuners, which we'll go over shortly here. And in theory, I'm hoping we'll get this to work where we can get this truck running in closed loop with the factory ECM and just one O2 sensor. So I'll flip the camera around and we'll get started. Alright guys, so like I said, this is the factory narrowband O2 sensor. It is an NTK part number 24626, and I also bought a second one, but I mainly bought this just for the connector on it, and I'm gonna end up cutting the connectors off of both of these actually, and then I'll just keep this one as a spare in case this one fails. But this one is Denso 2344012. So that's the first thing I'm going to do is cut the plugs off of both of these sensors, and then I'll go plug these in under the truck, and then we'll have to connect some wiring between each of these plugs and then run another set of 4 wires up to this one, which is going to go in right now. I've got my wideband O2 in this bung that's welded on just downstream of the turbo. So eventually, if this works, I'm going to weld in a second bung in here, but for now, just for testing, I'm just going to pull this wideband O2 sensor out and put this narrowband NTK sensor in its place. Okay guys, so I've got the connectors cut off of the two O2 sensors I bought, and like I said, I'm not actually going to use this Denso one. I kind of just bought it for the connector, but we'll just have a look at the wires here. So and they're different wire colors from the NTK to the Denso sensor. So on the NTK sensor, the signal for your narrowband O2, which I think is like a 50 millivolt to 900 millivolt signal. The signal is the black wire. The gray wire is the ground for the signal, and the 2 white wires are the heater and the power for the heater and the ground for the heater. And on the Denso sensor, colors are a little different. So the white wire will be the ground for the signal. The blue wire is actually the signal wire, and the 2 black wires are the power and the ground for the heater. So now I'm going to go under the truck, and I guess we'll start on the driver's side, and I'm going to plug this connector into the factory wiring harness. And on this side, I'm not going to use the heater wires. I'm just going to use the sensor wire and the sensor ground wire. So I'm just going to put a little bit of heat shrink tube on there to seal up the ends of these wires so they don't short out or anything like that. So I'll do that now. Okay, before I go under the truck and plug this in, I'm going to extend the wiring, because this one's going to plug into the driver's side O2 connector on the harness, and then these wires for the sensor and sensor ground are going to have to go to the other frame rail of the truck, basically, where we're going to connect that other plug-in. So I've got some 18 gauge yellow and 18 gauge black, so I'm just going to add 4 or 5 feet of wire onto there, and then like I said, I just put a bit of heat shrink tube on the 2 heater wires for the heater power and ground, and heated it up and just squeezed it closed, and that'll keep any moisture out of there and keep those wires from shorting out. So that's what we'll do now. We'll extend these wires by about 4 or 5 feet, and then I've got some of this braided sleeving or loom that we'll put over top of the wires to keep things neat. Alright, so we got those wires extended. I connected a yellow wire onto the gray one and a black wire onto the black one, and I just used these heat shrink butt connectors, and like the title says, you shrink them down with a heat gun. They're that big when you put them on, and then when they shrink down, they shrink right down, and you can see there's a bit of glue inside them there. You can see right at that edge there's a bit of glue seeping out, and that just seals it all up and makes a good strong connection and keeps water from getting in there and stuff. So now we will put this into some of this braided sleeve and go plug that in underneath the truck and run these wires over top of the transmission, I guess, to the passenger side frame rail where we'll put the other connector on. And that is what it looks like once I've got that braided sleeve on there. Looks almost factory, other than there's a bit of a lump in there where those butt splice connectors are. Looks like a snake that swallowed something. But now we'll hop under the truck, plug this end in on the driver's side, run this end over to the passenger side front O2 sensor. Alright, so we're looking at the driver's side. This is the stock factory O2 Upstream connector, and it is by the transmission. There's the transmission pan and the gear shift park neutral drive switch, or whatever you call it, and neutral safety switch or whatever, and just above there is where my connector is. So I plugged in that harness that I built, and then there's this little blue connector thing that goes in there to keep it all together, and then I ran it over top of the transmission, and over there you can see the wires hanging down on the other side of the frame rail. So we'll go look at that end of it now, the passenger side connector. Alright, so here we are looking at the passenger side connector. I'm going to plug in that little chunk of connector that I cut off of the Denso O2 sensor. Plug that in here. Here's the 2 wires coming over from the driver's side sensor. And then we're going to need another 4 wires going from here up to the turbo in the engine compartment. So this is the connector that we're going to get our heater power from to run the heater on the sensor we install in the downpipe. We only need to get power from one place, so that's why we only needed 2 wires going over to the other sensor, because we're just running the signal and the signal ground over there. But we do have to get heater power up to that one. So now I'm going to build a 4-wire harness to go from here up to the engine compartment. So that's what we'll work on now. Alright, so I got about a 6-foot harness built here with 4 wires. And then on the end that's under the hood, I put some shrink sleeve over the end of that braided sleeving. And I'll do the same thing on the other end once I figure out how long it needs to be exactly, because as you can see here, that braided sleeve starts to fray pretty good. So, but I think if I put this shrink sleeve over top, that should help keep it nice and neat. So now we're going to string this from the that connector under the truck by the frame rail down there, and bring it up to this area here where my factory, my wideband O2 is currently plugged in, and we're gonna unthread that, thread in that new NTK sensor, and then hook the wires all up here, and then have to hop into HP tuners and make a couple changes, and then we'll see if it all works. Alright, so I got that wire harness ran up to the engine compartment here, and I spliced this NTK factory narrowband O2 sensor onto it, and I'll want to be able to disconnect it from the harness so I can thread it in here. So I just put these, what are they? I got them over here. Female insulated quick connectors and male insulated quick connectors, so that way if I need to change the sensor or whatever, I can just pull these connectors apart. So now let's hop underneath the truck again and look at the other end of the harness here and get that all spliced together. Okay, so here we are looking. There's the wiring harness that comes down the passenger side frame rail. I've got that Denso connector that I cut off plugged into the factory harness. I got my 2-wire harness that's going over to the driver's side connector. And I've got my 4-wire harness that goes up to the narrowband O2 sensor in the engine bay. So basically the 2 white wires in this harness are going to get spliced to those 2 black wires connected to the factory harness. The blue wire is the signal wire, so that's going to get connected to the 2 black wires, and the white wire in the Denso connector is the signal. So that's going to get, no, that's the signal ground. So that's going to get connected to the 2 yellow wires. So I'm just going to use some morettes and splice those together. And there you can see I've got those wires spliced together. These 2 are the heater wires, and the signal wire, and the signal ground. So I'm going to tape up them morettes and zip tie this bundle up so it's not hanging down below the frame rail. And alright, so I got them wires taped up and zip tied underneath the truck, and then in the engine compartment here I've got that narrowband NTK O2 sensor installed in the bung, and just kind of zip tied the wires to the heater hoses for now. So now we can I'll have to go grab the laptop and we can look at what we need to change in HP tuners. Okay guys, so we're in the laptop view. I've got my most recent tune file open. We'll go to engine, fuel tab, and I think all we have to change is this injector bank select. We basically have to make all these zeros. So if I select all those cells and do this interpolate between vertical bounds, or I could enter a 0 there and hit equal, but I'll just do this. That changes all of these to 0. Now I'm going to save that and write the tune to the truck, and then we can go into VCM scanner, fire up the truck, and see if this is actually working. Let me just switch over to open up the scanner for a sec. So yeah, we'll know it's working by, I'm logging O2 voltage for bank 1 sensor 1 and bank 2 sensor 1. Those are the two that are wired together to the sensor in the downpipe now. So we should see the values in here fluctuating between 50 and 900 millivolts as the air-fuel ratio or as the mixture changes. And we should also see our short-term and long-term fuel trims for bank 1 making corrections. I'm not logging short-term and long-term fuel trims for bank 2 because those readings are probably going to be out to lunch, because and it doesn't matter because we're just working off the bank 1 O2 sensor anyways. So like I said, I'll get that tune dumped into the computer in the truck, and then we'll fire it up and see if we can get it to work in closed loop. And it's a decent day out, so I might even take the truck down off of jack stands and take it out for a drive and see how it does. So that's what we'll do now. Alright guys, just going to the laptop view again. I'll show you there's a couple things I had to change. I had that sensor working and reading millivolts on both bank 1 and 2 sensor 1, but it still wasn't switching to closed loop operation. So I'm just going to go show you guys what I had to change to get it to kick into closed loop. So under engine, fuel tab, first one was in this open loop base. I had this, if we go look at the tune, just previous to this one, I had that STFT open loop disabled. So I switched that to enabled. And then under oxygen sensors here, this closed loop enable, ECT versus IAT. In my previous tune, way back when I had set it, I had basically maxed out this table to force it always into open loop. So I changed that back to stock, which looks like that. And then I also had to change this long-term fuel trim. I switched that. That had been disabled in my previous tune. And same with this minimum engine coolant temperature. In the previous tune, I had set it to 139 degrees, basically to force it into open loop. So once I got all those settings back to stock, I was able to get it to run in open loop. So I'll just show you guys that right now. So I'm just logging. I guess I didn't even really need to log both because they're both reading off the one sensor. So the readings will be exactly the same, but I'm logging the millivolts from bank 1 sensor 1 and bank 2 sensor 1 O2 sensor. So we'll start scanning. Oh, I gotta turn on my key here. Oh, I probably didn't get the key turned on fast enough. So we'll try that again. And now we are scanning. You can see we're getting millivolt reading on that O2 sensor. The truck's not running right now, so but I'll start the truck right now, and you'll see right away the millivolts jumps up to 900-ish. And then as the truck warms up, we should see it switch. Yeah, there we go. It just switched to closed loop. So now we'll see these O2 sensor readings basically cycling up and down as it's making corrections to the air-fuel ratio. So, and there you can see our short-term fuel trims are active, and our long-term fuel trims are active. So it's a success. We're running in closed loop off of one O2 sensor in the downpipe downstream of the turbo. So we'll call that a win. Alright guys, so as you can see, that was a success. We did get that narrowband O2 installed in the downpipe downstream of the turbo, and did successfully get it running in closed loop in HP tuners. So we'll call that a win. We're going to wrap this one up, but next episode is going to be another combination video episode and podcast episode where we talk about the evolution of the Gen 3 and Gen 4 truck LS-based Vortec truck engines, and how to tell a Gen 3 from a Gen 4, and how to identify them in the junkyard if you've got the VIN number or if you don't have the VIN number, and which ones have active fuel management and displacement on demand and variable valve timing, and which ones to stay away from and which ones you want to get. So stay tuned. Make sure to follow us on Instagram, LowbuckLS, Facebook, LowbuckLS. Join our Facebook group. The guys in that group will get to see my videos a day early, and they're also sharing some cool projects and tech information and stuff like that. And yeah, it's a good group of guys to be a part of. So that's all for this time. We'll talk to you on the next one. See you next Tuesday.